All right, so we're going deep today on something that I think every safety pro out there listening has to deal with: OSHA record keeping. And specifically, we're going to be looking at this idea of covered employees. Who are they? Why does it even matter? And, how can we make sure we're getting it right when we're reporting those work-related injuries and illnesses? And you sent over some great resources from OSHA itself, and then also some really handy guides from Safety One Source. So I think somebody's getting ready to tackle those OSHA 300 logs.
Smart move. And, it's not just about checking boxes for compliance. Accurate record keeping, it really gives you a real snapshot of what's happening in your workplace in terms of safety, and helps you spot trends and, most importantly, prevent future incidents.
Right. So let's break this down. Let's start with the obvious here. Anyone on your payroll that's a covered employee, right? Full-time, part-time, seasonal. That intern who keeps making coffee runs, they all count, right?
Exactly. And, I think that's a good reminder that worker safety, it's not about someone's title or how many hours they clock. It's about protecting people.
Right.
But here's where it gets a little trickier. What about those workers who aren't on your payroll, but you are supervising them day to day? Like, imagine you've got a team of temps from an agency. You've brought in a contractor for a specific project.
Yeah. See, that's where I start to get a little fuzzy on the details.
Yeah.
So if I'm calling the shots on a job site, even if they're not technically my employees, I'm still responsible for recording their injuries.
That's the key. Day-to-day supervision. OSHA wants to make sure someone is accountable for those worker safety. If you're directing their tasks, setting their schedule, basically acting as their supervisor on site, then yes, you're responsible for their safety.
And
for accurate OSHA recording.
Okay.
Right.
So it makes sense. It's all about who's really in charge of that worker's day-to-day activities, not just who signs their paycheck. Okay. But then on the flip side, who doesn't count as a covered employee, I'm guessing if I'm a sole proprietor, working out of my garage, I don't have to report it to OSHA if I say accidentally staple my thumb to a workbench.
You got it. Yeah. Sole proprietors and partners. They're not considered employees for OSHA record keeping. Same goes for family members working for a family-owned business that doesn't have any outside employees, of course. That doesn't mean you shouldn't prioritize safety if you're working solo.
Right.
But the paperwork burden is a little lighter.
Yeah. That's good to know, because I've definitely had some close calls in my own workshop. But I can see how things could get confusing for folks running larger operations, especially in those trickier scenarios where it's not clear who's ultimately responsible for the supervision.
Absolutely. And that's where those resources that you mentioned can be really helpful, both OSHA and Safety One Source. They've got some great examples and explanations that can really guide you through those gray areas. Like, for example, let's say you're working with a temp agency.
Yeah. Let's unpack that one, because I think a lot of our listeners are going to relate to that situation. If I'm managing a team of temporary workers, but they technically report to the agency, how do I know who's responsible for recording their injuries?
It all comes back down to that day-to-day supervision. If the agency is still calling the shots on their daily tasks and how they perform their work, then the agency handles the recording. But
if I'm the one giving them instructions, setting their schedule, overseeing their work on my site, then the responsibility shifts to me.
Exactly. It's all about control and oversight. And this is where communication or coordination with other companies becomes absolutely vital. You don't want a situation where an injury goes unreported, because everyone just assumed someone else was taking care of it.
Right. That's a great point. Clear communication is key, especially when you've got multiple parties involved. So I'm taking away that we need to be really clear on those roles and responsibilities up front.
Couldn't agree more. And remember, accurate record keeping. It's about more than just avoiding a fine from OSHA. It's about understanding what's happening in your workplace so you can make data-driven decisions to improve safety for everyone.
Okay. So we're building a foundation here. We're not just, filing paperwork just to get it done.
Right.
It's about protecting people.
It is.
At the end of the day.
Absolutely. Okay. It really is. Think of those OSHA logs like a puzzle. Each record is a piece. And when you put them all together, they reveal a bigger picture of your safety performance.
Okay, I like that. That's a great analogy. So we're not just filing paperwork. We're gathering intel that can help us prevent those future incidents.
Exactly. And that's why getting it right is so important, because a missing piece or a misplaced piece can distort the whole picture.
Right. So let's talk about some more of those tricky situations. What about independent contractors? I feel like those relationships can be a bit of a gray area too.
You're right. They can be. And again, the key question is day-to-day supervision. If the contractor is managing their own work, setting their own schedule, and you're not really dictating their every move, then they're typically responsible for their own safety and record keeping. Think of it like this. They're running their own business.
Okay, so if I hire a plumber to fix a leaky pipe in my facility and they trip over a toolbox and sprain their ankle, I wouldn't be responsible for reporting that to OSHA.
Correct. They're in control of their own work environment and how they perform their tasks. Now, let's kind of flip the script a bit. Imagine you're hiring a contractor for a longer-term project, like renovating a section of your facility.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. So it's not just about the type of work, but also the level of control I have over the contractor's day-to-day activities.
Precisely. If you're providing detailed instructions, setting their schedule, and closely supervising their activities, then you might be considered the one providing day-to-day supervision.
So a short-term gig with minimal direction, the contractor's responsible, but a longer project where I'm more involved, that could shift the responsibility to me.
Exactly. It's a judgment call based on those specific circumstances. And if you're ever unsure, it's always a good idea to consult with legal counsel or reach out to OSHA for clarification. Better safe than sorry.
That's great advice. And speaking of advice, what are some practical tips for our listeners who are trying to make sure they're handling this correctly, besides calling their lawyer every 5 minutes, of course?
Well, first and foremost, familiarize yourself with OSHA's guidelines on covered employees. They're available online, and they spell out the details in black and white. Safety OneSource also has some excellent resources that break down the regulations in a way that's easy to understand.
Yeah, I've found those guides to be super helpful, especially when you're trying to wrap your head around some of those more nuanced scenarios.
Absolutely. And once you have a good grasp of the basics, take a close look at your own workplace and the different types of workers you engage. Are you working with temps, contractors, volunteers? Really assess those relationships and the level of control you have over their work.
Right. And don't be afraid to ask questions. If you're unsure about a particular situation, reach out to OSHA or a safety consultant for guidance.
Absolutely. It's better to clarify up front than to make assumptions and potentially face consequences down the line. And speaking of avoiding consequences, documentation is your best friend. Maintain clear contracts, agreements, and records of who's responsible for what. That way, if any questions arise, you have everything in writing.
That's a great reminder. Having those records can really save you a lot of headaches later on. So recap, we need to understand the rules, assess our specific situations, and document everything carefully.
You got it. And one more thing I can't stress enough, communication. Keep those lines open with all parties involved, whether it's the temp agency, the contractor, or even your own employees. Make sure everyone understands their roles and responsibilities when it comes to safety and record keeping.
It's all about working together to create a safer work environment for everyone.
Exactly. And remember, we're not just talking about paperwork here, we're talking about people's well-being.
That's a powerful reminder. And on that note, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the bigger picture of why accurate record keeping is so important. It's not just about compliance, right? It's about using that data to make a real difference.
You hit the nail on the head. Those OSHA logs are more than just a bunch of forms. They're a valuable source of information that can help you identify trends, pinpoint hazards, and implement effective safety measures.
It's about turning those numbers into actionable insights to prevent future incidents.
Exactly. It's about using that information to create a safer and healthier work environment for everyone.
I love how you put that. It's about taking those dry statistics and turning them into a story about how we can protect our workforce.
And it's a story that every safety professional needs to be able to tell.
Well said. And I think this is a perfect place to wrap up part 2 of our deep dive into OSHA record keeping. We've covered a lot of ground, from those straightforward scenarios to some of the trickier situations that can arise. But we're not done yet. When we come back for part 3, we'll delve even deeper into the why behind accurate record keeping and explore how those numbers can empower you to create a truly safety-focused culture in your workplace. Welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah.
You know, we've been talking about this whole world of OSHA record keeping, and specifically focusing on who qualifies as a covered employee.
Yeah, it's one of those foundational elements. It's easy to overlook, but it has huge implications for how we understand and manage workplace safety.
Yeah, we've talked about, those straightforward cases.
Yeah.
Anyone on your payroll, that's pretty much a given. But also those trickier situations with temps and contractors. And, it's not always crystal clear who's responsible for that day-to-day supervision.
Right. And we've stressed the importance of clear communication.
Yeah.
documentation
Yeah.
and really understanding those OSHA guidelines. But let's zoom out a bit. Why does all of this matter beyond just, checking boxes for compliance?
Yeah, that's a great point. It's really easy to get bogged down in the details. But we can't forget that bigger picture. As safety pros, we're not just filling out forms. We're dealing with real people's lives and well-being.
That's the heart of it. Each entry on that OSHA 300 log, it's not just a number. It represents a person who is injured or became ill while doing their job.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that what we do as safety professionals, it has real-world consequences. And accurate record keeping is a powerful tool for preventing those future incidents.
Absolutely. When you have a complete and accurate picture of the injuries and illnesses occurring in your workplace, you can start to identify trends, pinpoint hazards, and develop targeted intervention.
Right. It's about transforming those numbers into actionable insights. So instead of just reacting to incidents after they happen, we can be proactive.
Yeah.
And prevent them from happening in the first place.
And those insights, they can inform everything from your training programs
Yeah.
and safety protocols to your equipment selection and workplace design.
It's about creating a culture of safety that's data-driven and constantly evolving.
And that's where resources like those from Safety One Source can be incredibly valuable. They provide the tools and guidance to help you not only understand those record-keeping requirements, but also leverage that data to improve your overall safety performance.
Yeah. It's like having a partner in safety who can help you navigate those complexities.
Yeah.
And turn information into action.
Exactly, because ultimately, our goal is to create a workplace where everyone goes home safe and healthy every day. And accurate record keeping, it's a crucial step towards achieving that goal.
So, as you're tackling those OSHA 300 logs, remember you're not just filling out forms, you're building a foundation for a safer, healthier workplace.
And never underestimate the impact you can have. Even small improvements can make a big difference in someone's life.
That's a powerful thought. And a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into OSHA record keeping. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and practical tips to help you navigate this essential aspect of workplace safety. And to all of our listeners out there, keep up the great work you're doing to protect your workforce. Until next time, we'll see you on the deep dive.